This is a continuation of the worst victims of 4 Moveslot syndrome video I released in April, where I discussed these Pokemon being victims of 4 Moveslot syndrome. However, before moving on, I'd like to revisit what 4 Moveslot syndrome really means, as many of you commented your definitions and how it differed from mine. I'd like to point out in particular what the user by the name of Yobin3711 said, which I really liked, which is that 4 Moveslot syndrome isn't when a Pokemon just has a lot of moves it could viably run and just has to choose. It's when a Pokemon desperately needs 5 or more of its moves and can't run them all and is heavily limited by dropping any of them. Their example was Raichu in Red, Blue, and Yellow UU, where it suffers significantly by not being able to run a certain move. If it doesn't run Thunderbolt, it doesn't have Stab. If it doesn't run Surf, it gets walled by Golem. If it doesn't run Thunder Wave, it can't spread Paralysis. If it doesn't run Hyper Beam, it gets walled by special attackers. If it doesn't run Agility, it can't sweep due to speed tying with Tentacruel and Dodrio. This is more along the lines of the analysis I will be trying to cover in this video. This time, I'll also be separating the video into singles and doubles, as I feel 4 Moveslot syndrome is much more of an issue in singles, since you can't rely on your partner's moves like you can in doubles. I'd also generally argue that 4 Moveslot syndrome in doubles is a good problem to have. Think about it like your Pokemon suffering from success of being able to learn too many good moves. Keep in mind that all of the Pokemon I'll be mentioning in this video are still good, and maybe calling them victims is a bit of a stretch. This will also be exclusively Scarlet and Violet focused, so if a move was lost due to Dexit, it will not be mentioned in this video. With all that being said, let's look at some more Pokemon affected by 4 Moveslot syndrome. Starting off with singles focused entries, we have Blaziken. Blaziken has managed to stay relevant in every generation of singles so far, going from Uber in Gens 5, 6, and 7, and UU in the last 2 generations. Its hidden ability Speed Boost gives it huge potential in being able to sweep teams with a setup move like Swords Dance. Protect is also good for stalling turns to activate Speed Boost if you're worried you won't outspeed your opponent, with Flare Blitz and Close Combat being its best stab options. Now this is a perfectly fine moveset, but not taking advantage of Blaziken's great coverage moves can put you at a big disadvantage. Not running Thunder Punch means you miss out on super effective water coverage, which Blaziken is gonna want as a fire type. Not running Poison Jab means you miss out on super effective fairy coverage, not running U-Turn means you miss out on a reliable pivot move, and not running Knockoff means that you miss out on both super effective ghost coverage like Dragapult, which normally hard walls Blaziken's stab types, and being a nuisance to your opponent, since knocking off their items is really annoying. There's even more moves that Blaziken can run that aren't super common but still worth mentioning, like Earthquake, Stone Edge, and Brave Bird. Along with Kommo-o, Metagross was the last pseudo-legendary to be reintroduced into Scarlet and Violet. It has always had access to Bullet Punch, which is a great stab priority option since Metagross is slow, and upon its availability in Gen 9, it finally has access to a reliable physical Psychic type move with Psychic Fangs, so no longer will it need to rely on Zen Headbutt. Its best steel stab options other than Bullet Punch are Iron Head, Heavy Slam, Meteor Mash, and maybe Hard Press, although you'd probably just want to choose one of those 4 moves. Outside of just stab moves, Metagross has access to pretty decent coverage moves which you really only get to choose 1 or 2 of. Knockoff is just a great move as I mentioned with Blaziken. Earthquake gives you super effective coverage against the fire types that Metagross is weak to defensively. Trailblaze isn't great for damage but does raise your speed, which can be good for setting up, as is Agility. Ice Punch gives you super effective coverage on the ground types Metagross is weak to defensively. And if all else fails, you could just explode. Metagross also gets access to the hazard setting move Stealth Rock, and you could even do an Iron Defense Body Press combo with Metagross's high defense. Gliscor is another Pokemon that has consistently been used in every generation of singles, being in OU every game it has been legal. Its hidden ability Poison Heal combined with a Toxic Orb allows it to regain an 1/8 of its health every turn, which combines well with the move Protect. Earthquake and Dual Wing Beat are its best stab options if you want to have a more offensive Gliscor, with Swords Dance to set up, and great coverage moves like Crab Hammer for super effective damage on the many fire or ground types in OU, the Elemental Fangs to cover for both of Gliscor's defensive weaknesses, as well as some other moves like Knockoff, Poison Jab, U-Turn, Psychic Fangs, Stone Edge, and Night Slash. Gliscor will hardly ever run any more than 2 of those moves though, because it also needs to save room for some status moves if you want to have more of a defensive set. It gets access to Toxic, which is great for stalling opponents while you heal with your own Toxic Poison, and all 3 damaging entry hazards, Spikes, Toxic Spikes, and Stealth Rock. Great Tusk is one of the best Paradox Pokemon in singles, as it has a great offensive typing, being the only fighting ground type Pokemon ever. With its high attack and workable speed with some boosts, it works best as a physical sweeper. One possible set is using a booster energy to get a 50% speed increase from the photosynthesis ability, but you can only do this if you use a speed boosting nature with no attack investment, meaning you'll need a setup move if you want to do enough damage. Bulk Up is Great Tusk's best setup move, with close combat and either its ground type equivalent Headlong Rush or Earthquake as its best stab options. While ground fighting is a great offensive typing, it is very volatile defensively, as it has 6 weaknesses. Luckily for Great Tusk, it has coverage moves to hit every one of those types super effectively, like Ice Spinner, Stone Edge, Knock Off, Temper Flare, Supercell Slam, Play Rough, Iron Head, and Heavy Slam. Now, I know I mentioned Temper Flare and Supercell Slam in my underwhelming moves video, but they actually fit decently on Great Tusk, whose only other electric and fire coverage are the weak elemental Fangs. Lastly, Great Tusk can even be used to set up and remove hazards with its access to both Stealth Rock and Rapid Spin. Moving on to more doubles focused entries, let's talk about Ogerpon. This will be referring to all Ogerpon forms, by the way, as its move pool does not change between forms, just its secondary type, and the type of its signature move Ivy Cudgel, which, by the way, is essential to run as it is a very solid 100 base power, 100% accurate move with an increased critical hit ratio. If you're using any of Ogerpon's alternate forms, you'll need an additional move for Grass Stab, with your best options being Horn Leech, a reliable form of damage and recovery, Wood Hammer, a very powerful move with some recoil damage, and Grassy Glide, a weaker move but very valuable with its increased priority on grassy terrain. Ogerpon also has access to the better protect variant Spiky Shield, and the very useful redirection move Follow Me if you'd rather have Ogerpon fill a support role. Ogerpon can also set up its attack with Swords Dance and Focus Energy, as due to Ivy Cudgel's increased critical hit ratio, it will always land a critical hit after one use of Focus Energy. Ogerpon also gets Superpower, Knock Off, Play Rough, and U-Turn, all of which are great options. Many of you commented in the last video that Smeargle should be the biggest victim of 4 Moveslot Syndrome, as it literally learns every move in the game. However, I don't really find Smeargle to have a big issue in being limited to only using 4 moves. It's more limited because of its garbage stats, which is necessary to balance out an otherwise broken Pokemon. Let's still discuss what Smeargle likes to normally run though, just to see how much it's limited by only being able to run 4 moves. Spore is probably the most common move used on Smeargle, as it can no longer put opponents to sleep with Dark Void. Fake Out and Follow Me are great supporting moves as well, which I would argue are almost necessary to run. This leaves you with only 1 move slot left, and it really just depends on what kind of role you want Smeargle to fill, and what kind of support you want your team to have. Wide Guard is very valuable with all the spread moves of the restricted Pokemon, like Terra Starstorm Terrapagos, Origin Pulse Kyogre, Precipice Blades Groudon, Astral Barrage Shadow Rider, and Glacial Lance Ice Rider. Decorate allows you to double your ally's attacking power in 1 turn, and Instruct just straight up makes your ally move twice in 1 turn. I've even seen really specific strategies like Shadow Sneak to activate your ally Calyrex's weakness policy. You wouldn't really need to be running any more than one of the previous 4 moves I mentioned though, so most players run Spore, Follow Me, Fake Out, and then 1 more supporting move. But who knows what kind of moves we'll see players running on Smeargle during this year's World Championships. Raging Bolt has arguably dethroned Fluttermane as the best Paradox Pokemon in VGC, as it has both better special attack and better overall bulk than Fluttermane, so it's a bit of a stretch to say that it's a victim of anything. Though Fluttermane is much faster than Raging Bolt, Raging Bolt's signature move Thunderclap is a special electric type equivalent of Sucker Punch, a priority move. This combo is great with Calm Mind, a setup move that allows Raging Bolt's Thunderclaps to hit even harder. It is a little risky to have to rely on Thunderclap as your only electric type move though, so Thunderbolt is a great consistent damage dealing electric type move to run as well. You could even run Volt Switch if you want to have a pivot move, Discharge if you want to have a spread move, and Rising Voltage if you want to get really spicy now that Miraidon is here to set up electric terrain. To finish off Raging Bolt's stab, you have the choice of either Dragon Pulse or Draco Meteor, both of which are great options. Since Raging Bolt isn't that fast, you'd probably want some form of speed control, which it gets access to with Electro Web, the electric type equivalent of Icy Wind. Snarl is also a great option if you want damage control, but choosing any of these additional options doesn't leave you with enough room for Protect, which is just incredibly valuable in doubles. If you do choose Protect, you're potentially missing out on both speed control and damage control. Even with these limitations, Raging Bolt is still a very powerful Pokemon and a big threat in VGC. And those are some more victims of 4 Moveslot syndrome in competitive Pokemon. Do you disagree with any of the Pokemon I included, or feel that I missed any? Let me know in the comments below. Other than that, I really appreciate if you made it all the way to the end of this video. Thanks for watching.